All right, welcome to this episode of All Things LOCS, where we're discussing everything related to leadership, operations, culture, and strategies in healthcare, and we're helping you build better healthcare organizations. Now, today, just something a little bit different. We had a conversation recently, me and Antonio, with a dean at a medical college, and the conversation really centered around the transition that the students go through in the sense of being very empathetic, caring, servitude towards the patients, and then a transformation that happens when they're in school and they tend to come out a little bit more transactional, not as empathetic, and a little bit more self-serving. And we really dove into what's happening in school, what's happening with the students, and really more importantly, the impact that this has not just on, doctors and healthcare organizations, but the overall impact that it has on all of us as patients. And really the $1 million question that we really just kind of thought would be pertinent to ask is what actually happens to doctors and students in medical school? Well, we're going to find out on this episode. Catch you there.
So, hey, everybody. Thanks for jumping in on this episode. Dan and I recently had a lunch with a dean from a major medical school, and it was very eye-opening to both of us. It was kind of things that we were talking about. We felt, okay, we know this, but we didn't know like how entrenched it was. And during that conversation, they said something that really stuck with us. He told us that students are entering medical school incredibly passionate. They were idealistic, empathetic. They just really, really want to help people. And, the last several years, they're coming out even just that much more, cold-blooded. Maybe they're far more arrogant. It was like not good things. And somewhere along the way, we felt like, hey, something was changing. So, they're less empathetic, they're more transactional. And when that transformation happens, it doesn't just affect, doctors. It's not just these doctors that are going into the field, but it affects the entire healthcare system. So on today's episode, we're going to be asking the question in most people's minds about what actually happens to doctors in medical school. Yeah. So, Dan, we're not going to be getting into who or which school or anything like that. We're just going to talk about the general theme. And we met up, here in town. We just had a really, really great lunch, and it was just a really, really good give and take. And so what they did was they went through, All Things LOCS. They checked out, a handful of our episodes, and the general consensus was like, you guys get it. Like your episodes on staff shortages, your episodes on mindset. If more doctors had that, they'd be way better off. But it's not really happening, isn't it?
No, I mean, when you're talking about things such as, and it was definitely very interesting. You take a young, idealistic person, which is what we really envision doctors are like, and they go in and then they come out many years later, obviously, but they come out and it's it's a very it's a very different mentality that they have. And you see that effect. You go from being somebody who's really caring and empathetic. And again, this isn't to say doctors not caring and empathetic, but you do hear this feedback from people who are in healthcare right now, which is they're noting a big gradual shift with the younger generation that they're, and this is across the board. I know we're talking a lot today about doctors, but talk to nurses, physical therapists, chiropractors, all the same thing. It's like these kids are coming out and they think they freaking know everything and they're not coachable. You can't give them feedback. And it's like they rule the world already.
That's such a tough one. Like you can't give them feedback, which was one of the things that you and I were looking at, like kind of at that lunch, where they try to do various exercises to just push back on maybe what are some of the belief systems of the student, because you're gonna get tried out there in the field. So let's do some kind of healthy exercises, and they're literally running out of the room in tears, not because of the feedback, but the anticipation of feedback.
Yeah. So, and, I think part of this too is, we've talked, like me and you've talked to a lot of people in healthcare, a lot of owners. And I think the $1 million question, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but the question is what's driving it? But it's also, is it just systemic of the younger generation? You obviously hear a ton about the challenges with Gen Z. Or is it the way they're being taught? Right. And I think it's
probably a combo.
Yeah. And that's what I think we took away from that conversation, which is it's definitely part of it is, all right, it's a younger generation. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but maybe they're not quite as resilient or strong, whatever you want to call it. They're just not that great with handling feedback in a way that they don't take as a personal attack. But then how does that also drive the way schools actually teach and coach them?
Yeah.
And that was one of the, I think, for, one of the big points is what actually happens in those years where you're having somebody who's happy-go-lucky, service-oriented, empathetic, caring, and then they're coming out and they're maybe a little, like you said, arrogant, transactional, not maybe caring as much about the patient. And then you think, all right, now that person's only in their mid to late 20s. Now they're going to be in the field for 25 to 30 years. How does that actually impact all of us, right? Because it's just one thing, like you said, it's not just affecting doctors, but it affects the people that the doctors work with, and then it affects the people that the doctors actually treat. So that was definitely a big interesting one. But I think, part of it too is also understanding when we look at the environment that they're in. And that's where I'll let you maybe kind of pick up on that. Because that was some of the surprising stuff was just the feedback we got about what's actually happening inside the schools.
Yeah, so it's a really good setup. It reminds me of some of the work by Dr. Jonathan Haidt, Haidt. If you guys ever want to check out some of his stuff, he's been on all different types of shows. But he talks about how, kids during the social media era that, you and I kind of, in our era, so to speak, like we've knew what it was like to not have zero internet, to not have any of that stuff, and seeing it get integrated all the way to where we are today with AI. And so for people that are in their kind of late teens, early 20s, that their experience with the world, with like short-term memory loss, because they're constantly on a phone, they're constantly distracted. They don't get to sit down and actually reflect as much as maybe when we were in the same age, to actually just reflect like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Or they can sit on shame, on guilt, where it sits there where you're like, man, I should have done that differently. But when you don't give yourself an opportunity to do that, because I feel it, that little bit of let me doom scroll, let me play video games, let me do something else. And so any type of that potential feedback or criticism or perceived criticism, they just want to hightail it out of there. Like, I feel really uncomfortable being in this HR. I need a safe space. I need this. And it's like, man, I get that maybe in some fields for sure. But when you're a doctor and you're going to be a surgeon and you're going to be talking to families about the probabilities of death and dangers of a particular procedure, like you kind of have to really harden that area of your brain and practice. And one of the best places is obviously in school, where you're under the, tutelage of these, amazing professors. And there's this kind of fight between like maybe old school professors were like, hey, this is kind of the way we have to go, versus maybe some of these new school professors where they're like, we can't push them too hard. Yeah. They'll snap. And so there's this weird thing that's happening in terms of the space of these, where these students are operating, where it's like, they're not really getting pushed very hard.
Yeah. Yeah. The other aspect on top of that, which is, and that's a huge point, right? It's just, you're training the cream of the crop ideally, but then you don't want to push them like they're the cream of the crop. It's like saying, hey, we want all Michael Jordans, but then we're going to treat you like the guy who never steps off the bench. But the other aspect too that really never gets discussed is you're stepping into an environment. People who go to medical school typically are used to being the top dog. And then you go to school, everybody's a freaking top dog. So now you have a lot more pressure, definitely more than you've ever faced. There's more competition. And it automatically creates this almost desire to want to be perfect, because that's how a lot of other people are, right? It's like these people, I remember, like you said, our generation, we are older than the current crop of people. It's like, I remember back in the day when 4.0 was the shit. Now it's like, you don't even have a 4.7, you're a moron. Like, there's so many. So you're coming in like, I'm hot crap. And then the person's like, yeah, I was 4.7. I got a perfect score on my SAT. And it's like, oh, how do I perform to that?
And here's another thing that's very, very interesting is that students, because they are outcome focused. Yeah. So one of the topics, or one of the things that was talked about in that lunch, was that there's a lot of students that are hacking the system, that most of the lectures that they're in are taped anyway. So you have all these students, remember that? Yep. Where these students are not showing up to class. It's like what, less than,
you said 6%, I think.
Yeah, it was like less than 10% that should be there are actually showing up for those classes. And it's because these students are realizing, hey, I can just like watch it later at like 1.5 speed and compress my time.
And also memorize, I think is what he said too.
Yes, yes. But it's like that was the goal. Is like I'm not there to they are there to learn, but they're not there to engage and get better, where you actually have the professor in front of you. You can ask them questions. When you're just watching, a recording and you're just doing like at 1.5 speed, yeah, you're saving a significant amount of time, but you're missing actually some other stuff. So they're going through the video, they're having other AI and other technology to pick up on it, gives them the cliff notes of what they need to learn, and then they just test for it, and then they don't use it again.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, you're not actually learning anything.
You're
right?
not.
That's the problem. Is you're not learning anything, and then you compound that with you think about it too. What you're losing outside of the ability to learn, and you see this a lot in corporations with return to work mandates and what have you. But you lose the ability to actually just connect and communicate to other people that are in your similar situation, right? So like, hey, I'm struggling. I'm feeling the need to be perfect. I'm not, maybe I'm sleep deprived a little bit. I mean, obviously you're in medical school. There's gonna be times where you're not sleeping at all.
Mhm.
So, and I'm stressed and I'm exhausted and I don't know what to do and I'm lost. And then I don't have anybody I'm talking to because I'm not even going to class. So it's like, what kind of support does that actually create? It actually puts more pressure because I was like, shit, it's all on me. I don't even have Antonio to rely on. I have no team or support group here. So that's definitely a huge aspect. But then I think the other part of it too, that definitely compounded, is the mentality of the actual colleges and the universities. And, you see this a lot, and I didn't think you see this as much in the teaching aspect, but you do see it professionally speaking, where especially hospitals, they have certain criteria that they're being measured against. So they're willing to overlook mistakes because then it makes them look bad. It's like, all right, now we're going to get maybe less funding, or we're going to get docked pay. And then you're seeing that now trickle down into how they actually do with the students too. Because again, same thing. It's like, all right, we're being graded, kind of being benchmarked against other universities here. Number one, we don't want any complaints from the students about the way we do things. And like you said, I think about people walking out. It's like, I think the person we met was like 6 students just would walk out of these feedback sessions. Like, all right, now what's to stop them from either going to complain faculty or going to whatever board is overseeing, could be their crediting board, to file a complaint, or just pick up a phone and just bitch on TikTok about my school sucks, this is what they're doing. They want to avoid that like the plague.
They in that thing that he mentioned, that they mentioned, it was really interesting because he was doing some exercises with some of these students, and there was it was a classroom of a certain amount of people, and then out of that certain amount of people, there were 6 of them that they hightailed it out of there. They were in tears. They didn't want to take any of the feedback, any of that stuff. And a couple years later, when that class was ready to graduate, there was something that was funny, is that all of the students that participated and got into the nitty gritty of that particular exercise graduated, and the handful that didn't do it did not graduate.
Yep.
And so he's like, that's some telling evidence right then and there. And so I kind of wonder too, because when we're talking about these students that watch a video that's pre-recorded, they watch, have it on like 1.5 speed, that they're just outcome and rewards focused. It's not process, because that's how they're judged, is the outcome and the reward. So tell us a little bit on kind of on your end, is like there are people that go through the school system and then they get into work, and that mentality is there, is like, hey, I'm here, I did this, now I deserve a reward or a raise or this. And it's like, you just got here.
I don't see it so much as, and this is really just more about the feedback that I get from people that are really in it. It's not necessarily about the immediate reward. I will say they want, and again, I think this is just a little bit of a systemic issue anyway, but it's, hey, I want a reward quicker than I normally would have. So maybe instead of waiting, a year to get a raise first year out of school, it's, hey, 4 to 6 months in, right? But then the biggest challenge that you're really seeing is, those same individuals who don't want to, in that example, it wasn't even people who got feedback and then got upset. It was people who got upset before they even got the feedback. It was at the thought of receiving some negative criticism.
Yeah.
Right? And
like I'm not perfect, and we're going to call that out.
Yeah, oh my God, like somebody's going to tell me I'm not perfect. Exactly. I can't handle that because I've been in this shit for the last 20 years. But then there's that aspect too, though, of just when they step into the real healthcare, right? Like you're in it and you got real patients, not pretend actors. They still want to act with ego. There's a lack of humility. There's a lack of empathy, and I know some people are like, "Oh, empathy makes you weak." It doesn't. It's actually all about understanding the person you're talking to, which when you say it like that, isn't that a big component to healthcare? Like it should be, and that's what patients are looking for. So it definitely makes them worse when it comes to actually treating patients. But then it makes it difficult for them to really work with others in the setting of, I don't want to say a corporate setting, but just in a normal employee setting. It makes it difficult for them to work with, and it actually makes it far more difficult for them to actually then just grow.
That was one thing that we talked about too. Was if anything, things need to be flipped in terms of what we're teaching over to the students, because what we're teaching over to the students is this kind of consistent conveyor belt of arrogant people.
Yeah.
It's just authority positioned, and the example that they gave was like, it's kind of like attorneys. That I'm the attorney. I know this. I'm gonna lead you to the promised land because I'm the attorney.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that doesn't really work in healthcare, because you can't get into someone's body. Like they could be describing something and you think like, oh, this is what's wrong with you and this is what we're going to do. And then the patient is like, could it be anything else? Like, no, zero. And it's like, hold on, time out. So I found that to be really, really interesting, that's what's happening. And what they said was what needs to be flipped is having some humility and humble pie.
Yeah.
Basically, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think about when I was in school, and like, I'm not a doctor, but I did go to medical school. And those are all the things that we worked on, is how to communicate respectfully, how to listen. I mean, cold it is, I got chewed out by a professor. I mean,
what happened?
Look, and it wasn't, she didn't even do it for the right reason, but I'm like, I got chewed out. One of my buddies got chewed out, and it's so like I got chewed out for like something stupid. But they weren't afraid to essentially get in your face, and it wasn't like, oh, let me protect Dan's fragile ego. It was their interpretation of what I thought I was doing wrong. So like, I'm gonna call your ass out, and they did in front of the whole class. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't see that nowadays, but it didn't make me, it's not like I left school, obviously, and cried or went home and cried to my parents. Like, I got yelled at by the teacher. It's like, fuck, dude. Like, all right, like, they take this serious. That's, at the moment, I didn't appreciate it. But in retrospect, I'm like, they took the profession serious. And that's what I think really it's the signals that you're giving, right? It's just like no different than a parent. But if you're not willing to call people out and push them and really encourage them to be more than what they currently are, and I think that is one of the big points of school, is to develop people. It's like, if you're not going to do that, then you're just doing them a disservice.
What do you feel is kind of happening in the school systems where they're really pulling back on that? You mentioned like, getting into the student's face, and it's coming from a place of like, we just really care about the profession. You're going to be out there working on real patients. I'm not trying to get in to grill you just for the sake of grilling you because I'm a malicious professor. But I really do care that you get this point, and I'm going to do it in front of everybody, so it's drilled into your skull to never do that again, or to always do this. Why do you think that's really been pulled back?
Again, I think part of it is, and we touched on this, I think it's just the way that schools, I think it's an unhealthy obsession with, it sounds so silly to say, but grades. It's like, how are we being graded as medical school?
And that's kind of everywhere with education. It's like just regular public schools. Like they move some of these standardized tests just so the numbers look more favorable.
Everybody wants
for
to look
funding.
Better. Yeah. Anytime you're getting money, you want to make yourself, not everybody, but you tend to want to make yourself look better. So, all right, we'll get more money, which helps us. So they think they're doing something positive because, hey, now it helps us grow the organization. It sounds silly, but it reminds me of like this old, everything's old, but an old Simpsons episode where it's, hey, let's just get the worst kids to have them not come into school the day we're doing standardized tests. So that way our grades look better, right? And it looks better for us. So that they end up like tricking them and locking them like in a closet, basically. I'm like, that's essentially what we've gotten to. Like, we need to look better on our scores so we can get more money, grant money, what have you. So let's just keep it very easy and copacetic and don't have any complaints. And again, like when I went to school, when you went to school, it was far different. I didn't have TikTok. or Instagram. None of that shit existed. So it's not like I was going on like, hey, this teacher yelled at me today, and then to go viral. That's a concern which I get, because now it's all right. Well, what are these kids gonna say about us afterwards, and how's that gonna investigate? Am I gonna get investigated now?
Hurt the university's
Yeah,
brand,
so
all that.
I get that, but to your point, you have a responsibility, and that's the thing, is that you're creating a standard, and we'll touch on this standard and values, but you're creating a standard now that people look at when I'm in med school, that, all right, it's not as serious as everybody has made it out to be, versus the professors kind of getting in my face. Appreciate that in retrospect. I'm like, you actually cared about the profession of physical therapy. And I know damn well that when I graduated, I was like, dude, I take this shit serious. I still take it serious. I'm like, it's my profession. I'm not taking this lightly. And that's what you're not seeing from these new students, is it's just, whatever. It's just patient care. It's like, just patient care. You're actually impacting somebody's life. Could be very negatively if you don't take it serious.
Do you feel like that's kind of one of the reasons why you're also experiencing some of these people going into the workforce where they are shying away from extra responsibility and management opportunities and leadership opportunities?
No, I mean, I don't think it's that as much. That, I think, is just a product of what people, again, social media has its negatives and its positives, but it has pulled back the current a bit on corporate America, where it's, all right, I'm going to pay you an extra few bucks an hour to be the manager now, but that also means you work an extra 15, 20 hours a week with more responsibilities. So people that I think are just seeing that and it's like, I don't want to do that.
Mhm.
So I don't want to be a manager. I don't want to be a director. I just want to work and do what I got to do. But on the flip side, though, I know from an employer standpoint, talking to many of those individuals, they're looking at it saying, what do I do? The person doesn't want to do more. I mean, I was talking to somebody, a business owner down in Florida a few weeks back. And that's what she was saying. She's like, I hired these new docs, but then they don't want to do anything more than just what they're supposed to do, which I know some people probably listen like, all right, well, it's an employee. Which, like, there's no going above and beyond. There's no doing extra. There's no, hey, we have an event coming up. We'd like you to be there. No, I'm not doing that. It's on my time.
Mhm.
So that mentality, and I know, again, somebody who's young might say, well, you should be paying them for that. Yeah, different conversation here. But if you're trying to grow, but that's, I think, the biggest struggle is they don't want to grow.
Well, let's kind of flip that around for some people too. So imagine if there was a clinic or there was a practice where they had identical locations, right? One across town and one on the other side of town, right? And one of them, just for whatever reason, their staff are the ones that are exactly what you described. It's like, I clock in on the dot, I leave on the dot.
100%.
I'm just doing exactly what we wrote down on rules and responsibilities. Yep. And I think that has its place. That's cool, whatever. And let's just say there's another location where every single one of the staff members are like, man, I do my roles and responsibilities. I do my duties. I do everything. And I always try to find opportunities to go above and beyond for my colleagues, for my coworkers, for the patients. I try to go above and beyond for the employer, and really seeking opportunities just to be better and to shine.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the stages, those two.
Yep.
Which one do you think is going to crush in the market? Which one do you think is going to grow? Which one do you think is going to have a better work experience? Which one do you think is going to attract better talent down the road because that culture is much better? Which one do you feel like is going to have that I've already said, like, better productivity, not just in terms of the employees, but also revenue?
Yeah.
It's night and day if that's the mindset. And so what are we doing to attract those people, but also cultivate that within individuals? Like, oh, this is the norm here. Like, what can we do with that?
That's the challenge, all right? So if you're an employer and you're looking at it saying, well, the current crop of people that are coming out of school, they're all the same. The mentality, right? And it's not all the same. It's not, and again, like, we're not saying everybody out of medical school is the same, but again, you're in it for years. I mean, I've had employees that I've worked with in the past within the same company for years. Then they go away to school,
mm-hmm.
and they come back 3 or 4 years later, depending upon the profession. They're completely different.
Yeah.
Like, it's the stuff that they were swore by before. Now it's different. The super caring, hey, I'm going to talk to you about being accountable, and this and that, to the patient I'm talking. Then they come back and I'm like, who the hell is this person? What?
Yeah.
I'm like, what the hell happened to you when you were in medical school that you're completely switched?
Well, here's that makes a lot of sense. So with that example of those two is that you are going to have some people that are going into the workforce that like I just want to, for whatever reason, they just want to do their job. Totally fine.
Just fine. Yep.
Totally fine. But for the leadership in like in a hospital or in a clinic or an established practice and anything like that, if someone comes in where with the equal education, but they're coming in with a higher level of empathy, how can I go above and beyond? Let's kind of career map. They have a really great attitude, just a great stellar gold standard of an attitude. They're very coachable. They're asking for feedback. When it's time to promote or to when the business is scaling or you're trying to opening up another office, like who are you going to trust? Who are you willing to give a even bigger promotion, those bigger bucks, is to that person. So if anything, it's more for like an audience member to think like, well, when we're talking to the medical school, individual is like, that's such a tremendous differentiator is like, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb because you're wanting leadership and you're demonstrating all of the characteristics and attribute that tell them that you're going to be a good leader. And if your goal is to, have your own place down the road or you wanted to take on like a massive department or whatever, showcasing that is you're going to stick out like a sore thumb.
But that's the problem though, is that they're young and they don't think like that, right? So therefore,
maybe some do, yeah.
Some do, but a majority don't, right?
But that's what we're saying is like if you are one of those few and you do that, you are going to stick out.
100%. It's even more imperative then to go back, and this is kind of going back to the whole point that we're talking about is where's the responsibility lie with the universities to actually encourage that versus, you know what? You should be a little bit arrogant because you're the doctor. You got to demonstrate some authority. You don't really, maybe want to spend so much time. You're not going to have that much time with patients these days. So don't really be empathetic because that means they're going to ask a lot of questions and then you're going to get backed up on your schedule. Like that's where it starts. So, because again, if we're talking about, they're kids, right? If you're, I'm old enough now, everybody in their 20s is a kid to me, but if you're in your early 20s, it's like you're young and you're immature. And so most of them, even if they say, hey, I want to open my own practice, a lot of them are not saying, how do I differentiate myself? Because they think that just their degree is the differentiator. And then they get smacked by reality when they open a clinic. It's like, oh shit, I'm in an area, number one, that has 10 other offices in a 5-mile radius. And some of these people have been around for 20 years and I'm just starting out. So what's going to separate me?
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, these skills will, then it's, oh shit, I didn't really develop those skills. And, part of it too is this aspect within healthcare. And this is, even talking, during our lunch, you can definitely tell this is irritating the hell out of this guy, was if you're treating patients, you're in an automatic leadership position, but then most people don't look at it that way. It's like, well, I'm not the manager, director, or owner, so I'm not a leader. Like, you're working with patients. You damn well better understand you are a leader.
Well, let's kind of go back to the institution and their level of responsibility, because to me, I feel like with something like this, there's no accidents. So if you look at just education in general and how kind of the Rockefellers got into the education into the United States and where it was before and then where it is today, it's engineered.
100%.
And I think with what's happening with universities, it does feel like it's also engineered. We've had several guests on our podcast that talk about like there's going to be an extinction of our healthcare system. Like the way that we look at healthcare today is going to be very, very different in a few years because of these trends that are happening. And so when we think about like the VA or like a Kaiser Permanente or just having these massive conglomerates, these private equity that are just buying everything up, it does make sense in some ways if you're just teaching these kids to say things that minimize liability and exposure, where it's like, I'm the authority or here, and just keep that conveyor belt moving instead of maybe taking a little bit more time with some patients because that's profit.
Yeah.
Like I can't get to this person or this is what's happening or whatever. So all of that's to say is like kind of why do you believe that these trends are moving in the direction that they are?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you just outlined one right there, which is, now again, I know somebody like, you don't have any evidence, so I'm not going to say
there's a lot of evidence.
I'm not going to say this is fact about what I'm about to say next, but the reality is that we already know private practice, which we'll hit on that first, private practice ownership by doctors is plummeting.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
I mean, I know some people say it's 20%. But the amount of private practices, outpatient private practices in the U.S. that are owned by a doctor for, it has to be a doctor run practice is about anywhere between 30 and 40%. 5 or 6 years ago, it was about 62%. So you're seeing the Kaisers of the world come in and buy practices up.
Hold on. So out of all the private practices, 5 years ago, it was 60%, over 60%. And so that was by 2021. And then now it's around
35%.
About 35%.
Or take somewhere like that. So if you think
that's
about,
a lot.
Yeah. So what's going to happen in 5 years? Some people are like, oh, in 5 years, we're not going to have any. And then you're seeing more private practices owned by insurance companies. So Optum, which is a subsidiary of United Healthcare, I think they own about 4% of all private practices in the U.S. They actually own 35% of all the private practices in Vegas, which is crazy as hell. So a third of the private practices that you go to is going to be owned by Optum, United Healthcare. Boggles the mind. So if you look at the trends, to your point, it's why would we? It's a catch-22. On one hand, they tell everybody, anybody who's in medical school, like, we want you to open your own practice. But then, number one, they get no business training.
Zero.
And any doctor will tell you the same
or
thing.
Very little, yeah.
Any doctor, they'll say the same thing. I got zero training in school for business. I had one business class, and it was a freaking joke. But then, we want you to open your own practice. I'm like, you're not teaching me shit. So there's that aspect. But then to your point, like, they see the writing on the wall. So they're like, well, we have to tell you that you should open your own practice to keep us independent, but we know what the writing on the wall is, so let's just make better employees versus actually training these people to be tough and resilient and qualities that you're going to have to actually run a business or own a business. You can't be soft, right? And it's that dichotomy of the perfectionist mentality of a doctor versus you're going to have to fail as an entrepreneur. And like, well, let's not even teach you that. Let's just teach you how to be the perfect button-up, good person, but then they're actually doing the reverse and creating shitty employees.
Yeah. So here's my take on this. Here's kind of my theory, is that I think so when you look at kind of healthcare in general, like, there's a lot of lobbying that happens, and that lobbying is all over the place. And I do think that there's pressure in the education system, right? So my feeling is like, well, of course, like, if we're going into the school systems and like, all right, just make them more arrogant, have them be more, a little bit cold, a little bit more transactional. That empathy, that altruistic nature that they're coming in with, let's try to do things to maybe stomp some of that down or really reduce that down. And because the trend is kind of what you mentioned is like, well, there's less private practice, but at least we're planting that seed into their head. Like, you should open one up. You should open up your own clinic. That's actually a strategy what private equity is kind of doing, is like, they're keeping an eye out of what practices and clinics are being opened. And then, like, in a few years' time, like, how's it going? You ever think about selling? And then the business owner is just like, I am up to my eyeballs in debt. This is hard. I didn't really get training on this. I just opened it up. I pulled out loans. That exit sure looks good. And so private equity is buying these locations at cents on the dollar because they know that those owners are significantly burnt out.
I'm going to push back on that a bit because they're not going to buy out a young practice. That's fucking failing. Like, if you're at a school and you're just struggling, they're not going. Private equity is not, and that's what I think is actually gives some people hope, right? Is that, hey, I can grow this, get a certain multiple, and then sell it to private equity. Well, private equity, they look at your business like, your business is crap. Like, you're the owner operator, you don't have that many patients, everything's relying on you. Like, why would we want to buy that? We'd rather buy the guy down the road who is doing okay, but has been there for 15 years and has a director and just, So even that, though, it's just there. I think really what people are looking at too is like, all right, if private equity is buying up so much, what really hope is there for me as an owner?
Yeah,
because I definitely met some people that they were thinking of going down that pathway, and then they see what's happening. Like, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to be chewed up or join something that's seemingly very insurmountable versus somebody who's experienced and has been doing it maybe for 20 years? Like, all right, I got a patient base, I got resources, I can go open my own thing, and I'll be okay.
So I don't think it's actually one or the other. I think it's actually both. So you have some private equity groups that are like in home services. I'll use roofing as an example. They also get their money from insurance every now and then, commercial, residential. And you can have some roofers, just like in healthcare, like you can have some clinics that are essentially turnkey ready. They're profitable, they're good, they run well. They're going to command a higher multiple on that exit with private equity. But just like with roofers too, is like there's some where like they captured the market. They might be a little bit newer. They got some things right. And some of these private equity firms, they have divisions where they can come in and actually install some of their own temporary operators. Where it's like, all right, it's kind of floundering. We're going to bring in a team and actually help that out and get it to par, and we'll give you a salary, or we'll buy it out, or we'll do whatever.
Yeah,
I think it's one or the other too.
No, but they won't do that if you're a solo practice. All right. If you're like a one-off, they're looking for people like, all right, do you have multiple locations? Do you have something that actually will make us a boatload of money right off the bat? So that's the trouble, is that then you come out of school and then you're difficult to work with. Maybe you're a problem. We talked. Oh my gosh, man, I can't remember the date, but it was one of our podcasts with Ashi Aurora, and she talked about difficult, disruptive executives. But it was also having to do with disruptive surgeons or, high-ranking doctors, right? And it's like the person who's, I'm doing a few surgeries, I'm making you a boatload of money, but I'm toxic, I'm narcissistic, I don't work well with others. Like you're helpful in some instance, but you're actually hurting us in another. And really when you're looking at it saying, all right, well, that person, maybe they have aspirations to open up their own practice one day. Who's going to actually teach you what you need to learn, right? Nobody trains, the dickhead in the organization, the toxic individual. They're like, hey, you're really toxic. Let me do some one-on-one coaching with you. They're like,
a little bit of a lost cause.
Yeah, right? It's like, why would I do that? No. So when we talk about the implications too, when you come out of school, you're making it not just harder for yourself to grow, but to your point, if you're like, well, you're one of those individuals who wants to open their own practice, you're never even going to learn. You're not going to learn what it takes to actually do that. You're not going to have any mentors that want to work with you, because mentors, and I really appreciate that you bring this up a lot. Mentors look for people that are coachable, right? And if you're not coachable, who the hell is going to want to work with you?
Yeah. With the mentorship aspect of it too, like I think that is an element in business that I think people, it's like, if you know, like if you have incredible mentorship and you're able to have a positive give and take with someone that's been there, done that, or they have really good information for you, and they're just willing to pour into you because they love seeing people succeed. And it's hard to really quantify that too as well. Like imagine if you were mentoring Kobe Bryant. Imagine if you were mentoring, like a Tony Robbins when he was younger. It's like, how do you quantify the impact of an individual like that? And with doctors, like there's some amazing doctors that build out some incredible things. And they kind of attribute it. It was like, well, I had someone really believe in me.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually did the things that they asked me to do that maybe I didn't really know if it was good or bad. I didn't trust it. I had my doubts, but I did it anyway. And it just served me. And to kind of have that kind of hat in hand type of mentality, that like Jedi Padawan type of mindset is being stomped out in the school system.
Yeah.
And it creates this really big void with the established amazing doctors that have been there, done that. They've been they've been in healthcare for decades, that they do want to transfer their knowledge over to this new generation, but they're not seeking it.
Yeah.
That's really crazy to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I mentioned at the beginning the old, nature versus nurture, right? It's how are you brought up too? I mean, you also see kids coming out of college nowadays. I never thought I would ever say this, bringing their parents to a job interview.
Oh, really?
That's a thing.
That blows my mind.
That's a real thing, right? So if that's,
I will never do that.
and that's not an indictment on everybody who's in their 20s, right? But again, it's just patterns of behavior. Like I never saw that ever.
It just shows how far we've swung.
Exactly. So you're seeing that kind of mentality, right? So it's like, hey, this is the way I was raised, so that's my expectation out of medical school. People in medical school, they have it hard too. So it's not as if it's, they're walking on taking it easy. So it's like, all right, let's just keep things copacetic, keep it easy. But they come out, and then if they're one of those few individuals that you mentioned that I made it work, I opened my own practice. Hallelujah. How is my behavior now going to impact the actual organization? So when we talk about, all right, what, companies that want to get bought out, or companies that end up getting bought out by either large institutions or private equity, they don't want to buy an organization that's filled with toxicity, high employee turnover, low productivity, crappy patient outcomes. These are the ramifications that we talk about. When we're looking at the lack of leadership skills, which is just, it's crazy to think in as the owner, but that's what a lot of these people come out with. And look, me and you both work with business owners who they're not really open to feedback. They're the ones that struggle the most. Their organizations, and they
Right.
might grow, but that's what tricks them. It's like, well, we're growing, so the problem's not me. Versus, you could have made an extra 30% if you were just actually open to
Yeah, because
getting
it's
some feedback and finding out
yeah.
ways you could improve yourself.
because it's a holistic process.
Yes.
Like oftentimes we're trying to identify, even dare I say, the trauma patterns of these CEOs.
Yeah.
Because it manifests itself very differently from organization. Like we could give somebody a tried and true strategy or a multi-point strategy to grow their business, and they do it 50%. They're gonna see growth.
Yes.
It's like, all right, it's like giving someone like a workout plan, and they didn't do all of it, they did some of it versus nothing. You're gonna get a little bit
You get
better.
something,
But if
yes.
you would have gone the whole 9 yards, it would have been way better. And if you did go through the whole 9 yards and you had a great attitude about it, your quality of life is significantly better. And so we see that too with business owners, where it's like, it's just the strategy, it's not me. It's like, no. If you had that plus the strategy and everything else, the compound effect of that is really hard to quantify. And so one thing I wanted to mention too is, like, when these students, they start to build their own business and all that, there's kind of two ways you're going to get humbled. And, one of it is through a mentor. It's through just reading and absorbing the right information or experiencing the right information of, like, you're going into the market and you already have that in you. You maintain your level of empathy. You maintain your level of understanding. You're naturally a good communicator. You're doing things. So when you go into that world of, like, actually getting your own business, then that leap is a little bit better. But what usually happens is like someone has this mindset of that kind of arrogance and all that, and they want to be successful in running their own practice, and then life hits them.
Yeah.
And then they're looking at everything. Okay, it's not this marketing strategy, it's not this thing, it's not ops. Like it's me. And then begins that journey of personal development.
Well, and I was going to say too, and that's a good point. It's a good point you bring up. But it makes me think of, he was our guy when we were at the lunch with him, and this is very relevant to your personal development you just brought up, which is the aspect of going to see a medical provider, and then them not being open-minded to what your problem could actually be. It's like, all right, so Antonio, you told me some symptoms, and it's this. Okay, well, what if it's not? Nope, it's this.
Yeah.
And then in his story, he was like, what do you say? He's like, it turned out to be, it wasn't this, and it was something else.
Yeah.
That he went to the doctor for. And that's part of leadership, is, to your point, humility is, you know what? I think, I do believe it's this, but what if it's not that? Then what do we do? Nope, it's definitely this. So it's like, sometimes, you don't know, and it's that aspect of leadership. It's just, all right, am I open-minded enough, right? Because I think we often confuse IQ, and you do this really well, is IQ doesn't mean you're got a EQ, right? You can be intelligent as hell, but very dense and closed-minded, which is what some people develop. Like, I'm strict and I'm rigid, but I'm a genius. Like, yeah, but you're not open to other ideas either. So what happens if your diagnosis is wrong?
Yeah, there's that saying, have you ever entertained the idea that what could be wrong? And it's like, I've never even thought that I could ever be wrong. And it's like, and that's where you're wrong. Right. Because just like with anything, there's a lot of gray area, and especially when it comes to people's bodies.
Yeah.
Like I could be saying sharp pain because that's just all I know how to describe something, but it's probably something else. And so, yeah, like having that is really, really huge. And I do find that just people generally that are passionate about their personal development, like they're reading books or going to conferences, they are connecting with those that are a little ahead of them. They are mastering their emotional intelligence, their communication styles, all of that stuff is only going to make you that much more, valuable as a doctor, which makes you just that much more formidable as a business owner.
Yeah.
Which what that does is people feel that too as well. So people in your market, they're like, man, I really like going to Dr. Dan because, like, his people are sharp. Like I get treated so well, and when I tell them, like, I'm not sure if that's what it is, they actually have the humility to be like, you know what, like what else are you feeling? Like, let's kind of unpack that a little bit. They're going to win more than those other folks, and they just don't get that.
It's interesting that you bring a lot of, you think about, oh my God, when was it? I think it was about 2018 or 2019. And I was at a conference, and had happened to be Tony Robbins, but he goes, all right, today we're talking everything related to your values, your standards, your mission, and your purpose. And the first thing that popped in my head was like, ah, shit, I don't know any of that. I don't know. And that's what it is. Like, how many of you actually even know what your standards are, your values are? And maybe 10% of the room popped out, right? So it's to your point about taking time to know yourself, right? And self-develop is also understanding, all right, who am I and what do I actually value? You know, and it's not just necessarily my standards are hard work. More often than not, and I love, you know, we talk to business owners, like take the 3 people in your life that you really admire the most and what about them. But then there's aspect too of like, I know for me, it was definitely one of my, oh my God, it was either number 1 or number 2 was, I think, success. It's like, all right, that's not a really good, but you know, you're young, you know, you're a young dude. Like that's what for a lot of us, like, all right, just success, money, drive, like those are the things that matter to me most. It's like, all right, how does that show up in your life really helping you? And it's like, not much. But then what about negatively? It's like, oh shit, like this is, so you start seeing the pattern, so to speak, but it's, you know, understanding number 1, what are our personal, you know, what's your mission as a person, right? And it's the $1 million question, like what's my purpose in life or whatever, but it's like, what are you really here for? And is it for good stuff or just self-serving?
You know, when I was a kid, I remember my dad said something to me that always stuck with me. I didn't understand what it meant, but I probably was like under 6 years old. Like I was a little boy. And he said this, and I remember like the day. I remember he was shaving and like his freaking mammoth, like wool like beard. And he was shaving in the bathroom, and he was, because I was asking him all kinds of questions, and it was in Spanish, but he said, you know, one of the scariest things you're ever going to have to do in your life is find out who you really are. And I remember that so clearly.
Yeah.
Like, and I was a little boy, and I was like, what does that even mean? Like, what? I don't get it. Like, but the way that he said it is like, one of the scariest things you're going to have to do in your life is find out who you really are. And so I've always felt like, that almost pre-framed me. It planted a seed of, this is just what we have to do. We have to kind of peel that onion back, peel those layers, and you kind of go through this multiple times in your life, like when you're adolescent, when you're kind of a young adult, and you get to the crux of it, and that process is actually a little scary because you're like, oh, I thought that was this, and I wasn't.
Yeah.
And I feel like if that was the norm more in school systems, where people are kind of, let's just say even coming out of high school, we're like, I really value work ethic. Yeah. I really value accountability. I really value this. And so they're going in and they're holding professors accountable. They are in a respectful, ethical way, and vice versa. And they're like welcoming that. And I think that changes a lot. And it seems like with that conversation we had with that dean was like, if they just did this earlier and established it and it was authentic and true, everything else takes care of itself. It's just that happens to be the antidote to their problems later on in life when they're running a business, when they're actually going over core values, mission, vision, purpose, communication, like goal setting. It's like that is a complete afterthought. We're like, man, you should do that as early as you can and constantly tweak it and work it. Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you if, I mean, we learn our lessons through life, and it shapes us who we are. But I've thought about that even for myself. It's like, if you can go back in time, it's like, I wouldn't change much, except I wish I just, to your point, like, I wish I started working on those leadership skills a lot sooner, right? And it's just even same thing, which you're young, you're trying to prove yourself. It's a certain mentality that you have, but then you do realize, like, all right, this really is actually just more about me. And it's not about other people, even though I always, even for me, like, I treated patients amazing, but then the way I worked with employees and colleagues was about me. Right. So it's going to spill over somewhere. So to your point, it's like, yes, the sooner you can work on your soft skills, the sooner you can work, being accountable, communicating properly, taking responsibility for your actions. It's only going to just not even help you be a better medical provider or doctor. It's just going to be a better human being.
So on that note, because you kind of hit on a couple anyway, but part of that lunch we were talking about rebuilding the ideal physician. Yeah, that what's going into the market is hurting some clinics. It's the mindset of the people. It's executional performance. It's feedback. So we put a couple of points together here on 9, rebuilding the ideal physician. What does that look like, to you? If you had a blanketed, like, we need to get this, and they're going to be the best physicians of like
Yeah,
of
I
tomorrow.
mean, look, at the end of the day, you still need to be good at what you do, right? So nobody wants to go to the high emotionally intelligent surgeon who sucks at surgeries. So
Yeah.
it's like,
He's like batting
yeah,
200
I
on
communicate.
surgeries.
Yeah, it's like
You will die.
he communicates really well with telling people how he screwed up.
But it was a great
Yeah,
experience.
exactly.
Yeah.
Cool
You're
guy.
fucking dead, dude.
So yeah, obviously you have to be good at your hard skills, your technical skills, but being able to have some emotional intelligence, just being aware of what your emotions are doing to others, being aware of other people's emotions, empathy is a component of that.
And just making a quick note of that, it's not just with the patient, but if you are like a surgeon and it's your nurses and your nurse is off or your other your team is off, you can pick up on that. And that helps with the general outcome
Absolutely. Resilience gets thrown around a lot in healthcare. And sometimes too much. Sometimes it's just put forward as the antidote to everybody's problem. Like, you gotta be more resilient. You gotta be more resilient.
How would you describe resilient?
It's necessary. It's a component, and it's really understanding that stuff's gonna go wrong. Whether it's the patient who didn't get better, doesn't mean somebody had to die, but maybe the patient just didn't get better. I've had that happen. It's like, shit, man, you came to me for help and I didn't help you. I tried everything and I didn't help you. That hurts. I mean, the first time that happened to me, I was like, shit, bro, this sucks. Like, what the fuck? And the owner had to actually tell me, was like, it's going to happen, dude. He's like, that's part of healthcare. You're not going to be able to help everybody, even if you give them the A++ treatment plan. And they do everything that you told them to do at home, they still might not get better. I'm like, damn, that blows. So it's being able to understand it's not always going to go your way. And it's just really, how you handle setbacks. But it's also understanding how to...
Picking yourself back up
like
when
how to
there's
realize,
a setback.
Well, it's just how to realize what's actually serving me and what's not. It's not always just about failure. It's just like, all right, just like I'm not failing, but I'm not getting any better. So like, what's actually helping me? And then just people that are, someone have a mission and a purpose. Like I always go back to why'd you go to medical school to begin with? Whenever I had and these are conversations I've had with providers a ton. When I see them maybe kind of falling off the pathway, kind of starting to walk off the yellow brick road, I'm like, well, let's dial it back to why'd you actually go to school for this? Because we just lose sight of that sometimes. You get so caught up in some of the daily bull crap you got to deal with, insurance, notes, non-compliance, like all the shit that they don't teach you in school. You deal with that, and then it gets you off track from what you actually went to school for. So people that are just mission and purpose driven.
It's like what you do and why you do it.
Yeah, and then people that can just overall communicate really well. To your point, not just to patients, but to employees, sometimes to patients' families. So it's how do I communicate, and then just am I the example that I want to be for other people, right? Because it's very easy, and we've heard this from some business owners, like, I want all my employees to be this, this, and this, and it's like, you're not doing any of that either.
Yeah, and just a little kind of asterisks around like a strong communicator. It doesn't mean like you are going into meetings like strong and just verbally throttling somebody. When I think of strong, it's like you're versatile. You can be very endearing.
Yeah.
You can be very forward and direct. You can be very understanding, and having that versatility. So you can adapt to different situations depending on what's happening with your colleagues, your employees, your team, your patients. That would equal a strong communicator, not just that you're yelling at somebody.
No, you got to know, like I say, how to be adaptable, right?
100%.
To the situation. So, those are really, I mean, there's a ton of other stuff, but those are, I think, that are big ones. And when you look at what is going to then translate into from the person to then the organization they're in, it's really everything that we touched on, right? It's being able to lead a team. I mean, if you're a doctor, you're going to have a team around you, automatic. It might be physician assistant, maybe a nurse. Somebody's going to be a support staff for you, and they're looking at you. And that's a response. That's why I say it's not just a responsibility with patients, but employees are looking to you as the leader. So that's why it's shit. I better step up into that role. So it's understanding how to work with the team, and then how to make things really be as efficient as possible. Talk a lot about that in medicine, like whether you're using electronic health record, which most of us hate, but it's how do I just make the day-to-day easier? And part of that too could be, how do I communicate with my support staff to maybe help me with some things that just take me away from treating with patients, right? Because we talk about burnout a lot in healthcare, and that's part of it. I have less time with patients, but then it's, well, how's your support staff helping you with that? Well, they're not. Well, like, all right, then what are you doing, dude?
100%. And in kind of getting out of that lunch, I felt very optimistic about, especially the stuff that we created, because we went over a lot of that with this individual, and they saw a lot of our episodes, and what felt so great was like, oh my God, you guys get it. Like if this was integrated into our curriculum, or if this is like something that when people leave, medical school and they, go through kind of what you guys are doing, it's only going to lead to just better outcomes. And so when we went over kind of our LOCS protocol, like our LOCS solution around leadership, operations, culture, and strategy, and like why we have certain modules in place, even the thing that you built out on leadership, on just why that hits the mark. He's like, if more doctors had this, things are going to take care of itself, is because we're putting that back onto the forefront, and also giving people those kind of tactical, practical strategies on how to make more money in their clinic, how to have difficult conversations, how to make sure that your culture is elevated with everybody, not just a particular group in your business. So that was really, really was very encouraging for us, and we're really, really excited of what can happen in the future, and also what we're rolling out here with this program that we have.
Yeah, there's a huge aspect of people wanting, it's so crazy, but people wanting to make the mistakes, which I get. You're like, I want to learn from it, but it's, I wish I could have, they get down to the end of the timeline. It's, well, it took me 3 years to start finally getting some traction in my business. All right. What would life have been like if you could get that down to 1 year? Oh my God, it would have been totally different. But then they don't want to, it's like, so this mentality that we have too of, and this really kind of goes into, everything that we talked about, the mentality of the people that are coming out of school. It's like, I want to go in, I know what I'm doing. I'm not going to admit I'm making mistakes. And then it's just year one, I'm struggling. Year two, I'm struggling. Year three, it's like, all right, we're starting to get there. And it's finally by year four, like, okay, we finally made it. It's like, yeah, but wouldn't it have been easier if you just could have got all that out of the way in year one?
It's also, man, that's a really good point. Cause it's also like, they just spent so much time going through school and classrooms and spending a lot of, and really investing into their education. And then here we come along. It's like, we can kind of give you a lot of what you need in 6 months with a fraction of the time. And it's a inconceivable, like notion for them. Like, I don't get it. It's like, I mean, when you go through school and you eliminate the stuff that you don't need, like, you can kind of fly by that pretty quickly. And that's kind of part of, just being a business owner, is like, what do I actually need for my specific situation so I can continue to win? And I don't have to go through all that stuff.
Yep.
So that was one of the positives too, that we received, of just like, it's providing what's necessary. You don't need to have all that stuff unless your situation mandates it. But generally speaking, no, you just need the right stuff in the right bite-sized pieces within a shorter amount of time. And the differentiator that happens is through the roof.
Yeah. So I would say, put the bow on this. Look, at the end of the day, schools are great at producing those doctors, those clinicians, technical skills.
Brilliant doctors, yes.
But at the end of the day, it's just an understanding that, again, we need more leaders than just doctors and medical providers. And so, you made a good point. I mean, the schools are not going to drastically change how they teach. So it's up to you guys who are, maybe if you're listening to this and you're in school, those of you that are in school, to work on yourself, work as a leader. And then honestly, I would say, if you're a hiring organization, is to just understand that this is the pattern that we're in right now, right? We're in a pattern of people graduating and, having some of these challenges that we talked about. So it's going to be understanding, all right, how do I maybe adapt my own training and onboarding to these individuals? How do I change my interview process? How do I change my pre-interview process potentially to not accommodate, but just adjust for where we're at in society? So I would also challenge you guys who, own clinics to honestly even just go back and we'll drop it in the show note of like the episode we talked about hiring and onboarding. This is what you're dealing with now. So you could either complain about it, or you could actually start to change and be adaptable as well.
Yeah. And if you're listening to what Dan says and you're like, man, I want that roadmap. I want to get there easier, quicker, and faster. Click the link, set up a call with us. We'd be more than happy to help.
Hell yeah. Let's go.
All right, guys. Thanks so much.
Next time.